Shall we begin? Let's begin now.
Hey friends, I am Neethi the Pharmacist, here with my co-hosts, Janae Williams and Valerie Cruz, and we are on full. Welcome to Our View. Hey friends, we are so excited because we're continuing our conversation this week with Uncle Mark from Fat Radish Farm, where we had started the conversation last week talking about supplements, the supplement industry, talking about how people are amending soils with, different types of supplements, amending the soil to create organic and, living soils. But now, today, we're going to actually get into a deeper conversation with Uncle Mark about how, or what's the difference with living soils using livestock, for example, versus using various amendments. And the other exciting thing that we want to share with everybody is that, did you know that if you have a Roku, that you can download the Nissan Communications app and you can watch us on your Roku every week? Did you know?
Yes.
So it's actually not that hard, you guys. So if you follow us on Facebook on our View page, then Valerie's going to post instructions on how to get hooked up with Nissan Communications on Roku. All right. So.
Yeah, you need to know Uncle Mark. This is part 2. And if you tuned into part 1, I know you're ready for part 2. But Mark, I want to tell you a little bit about him. We call him Uncle Mark. That's first thing. But his name is Mark Beddingfield, and he's owned and managed several agricultural related enterprises prior to becoming the owner of Fat Radish Farms, which is located in North Carolina. He presently on that farm practices regenerative farming methods. So we want to continue that conversation that we had.
Welcome, Uncle Mark.
Hello.
So we were going to, one of our first questions for you is like, what does it take to regenerate soil? Or, what is the difference between the regenerative soil that you guys have with livestock versus not? And can you have regenerative soil without livestock? And what's better? What's the difference?
Well, I think you can have it, but it's expensive to do because you have to bring in all the material from mulch and organic material from outside if you don't have it on the property. And generally you don't, because if you had it, you'd have good soil, but you have to bring everything in from outside. So it's very expensive. And you have to do it every year. So if you're using animals, you incorporate animals along with the addition, adding the organic material, and it becomes sustainable. And by sustainable, I mean that eventually you can get to a point where you don't have to bring anything in from outside to amend the soil. Everything that you do is on the property. And the other thing with animals is because the animals are working the soil, they're aerating the soil. You can also do that mechanically, but I don't think it's efficient as if the animals are doing it. And another thing is the animals also, chickens in particular, they eat a lot of the bugs.
So they become natural fertilizers?
Yeah.
Fertilizing, herbicides.
And pesticides.
Yeah, it's your pest control, it's your pesticides, it's your herbicide, but it's self-regulating, right?
Self-regulating, that's right.
And that's something I think that people aren't thinking about.
It's like, one way to look at it is that eventually you want to get to the point where, you spend almost nothing on amendments, and that means that, and you're raising a crop of chickens however you're doing your rotation. And you harvest that crop, and so you get the benefit of, 2 crops for one expenditure, if you will.
Don't y'all think that is really cool? That, I mean, I don't know how many of you have actually thought about this way, but I would like for you to think about one thing. Consider this, okay? So when you're taking supplements, it's really difficult to figure out what it is that you need. You know, everybody's saying, well, you should test and not guess, and all of these things, which are all those pieces and parts are complicated. It's stressful. It costs money. But what if you could, like Uncle Mark saying, that if you can inoculate soil and create living soil, how is that any different? And Uncle Mark, please correct me if I'm wrong about this, but I feel like the same way that you are able to create this regenerative soil, we can also create regenerative health by using the real food, inoculating our gut with the real food, and it is self-regulating in a way that after some time, we don't need any supplements anymore. I mean, I know I've realized that for myself, that the only supplement I need anymore is I need vitamin C, which our body doesn't produce or you know, obtain from the food very easily. Or, you know, maybe I'm using some type of magnesium supplement, or I'm using salts, like, you know, mineral dense salts, to be able to help supplement my diet. But outside of that, I find it really powerful and amazing. And I love the fact that it's so easy. We've been talking about how easy it is to live this regenerative lifestyle. It's mainly easy because we can just find the joy in the food and not have to think about the chemistry project part of supplementing with all these nutraceuticals, which it sounds to me like, you know, as a farmer, you know, I don't believe in my experience that all farmers are equal. I think that, you know, to be a farmer, you have to be some kind of soil biologist, and you also need to be, you know, some type of vet to some degree all the time, whether you're licensed or not is irrelevant. You also have to have a gut instinct. You also have to, you know, be able to follow circadian rhythms and so many other things. It's not the same. And every farmer isn't really good at that. Just like everybody who sets out to be a doctor doesn't have the same healing touch or bedside manner, just like the same person who wants to be, just like anything. Like everybody, you know, I might want to be an architect, but I probably might not be very good at it. You know, there's always someone who's doing a really good job. So I don't know that it's fair to say that all farms are equal, but don't you think that this is very cool? That if you're doing this regenerative farming, or you're working with a regenerative farmer, sorry, and getting the food, that you can simplify your life in all these ways and save money. I mean, what do you think?
Yeah. But, you know, one thing I would mention is that, in my opinion, you have to be more of a biologist and a chemist to be a commercial farmer than you do a regenerative farmer. Because if you, because the animals and the organic material does all the work for you. And if you have a soil that's sterile, and that every single thing that plant is getting comes from, you know, that's when you got to be really careful. You know, it's the pH right. The pH has got to be perfect. If you're practicing regenerative methods, all that stuff is self-corrected. So you don't have to worry about what's the pH. Do I have too high a pH? You know, it's all self-regulated.
Nature has it all figured out, doesn't it?
Nature's a lot smarter than we are.
So there's a direct proportion, directly linked. When you have to work so hard for the soil and do all this pHing, and you're being really specific about nutrients, and you got to worry. Then that's where, because you brought up, Nikki, about testing, because at one point my mindset was, how am I doing? Before I really got into a regenerative lifestyle, I'm thinking I need some test to see how am I doing.
All the time.
You don't need to test to see how you're doing, because when you are living a regenerative lifestyle and your food is getting to higher and higher qualities, your body already tells you how you're doing. You can feel that you're feeling great.
And it's not just your food. I mean, food is the gateway, but, you know, it's also, you know, I mean, there's so many other things that are involved, just like there are, you know, with the farming side of it, because, you know, there's still having a strong mind, you know, meditation, sleep is a huge factor, rest. Just like resting the land, right, Uncle Mark? Like if you're not resting the land, or having the animals migrate, or, there's so many pieces to this. The massaging of the earth is the same as like us getting a massage too, like if you're not helping to promote oxygen, and that is kind of what the massaging of the soil is, isn't it? The animal moving on the soil.
Yeah. Yes.
And if all of that's good, then we're good. It is a direct proportion. It's a direct link.
I mean, it's
if
a synergy.
All of that's good,
it's a
then
synergy.
we're good. And you talked about the mind.
Yeah.
So I rest assured now. I didn't before. I was a little worried. I was always concerned about my health and, just what am I going to be sick or what's going on? I don't have those concerns anymore because I know the terror is gone. Because really
we want everyone to be relieved of this terrorism, Uncle Mark. What, it's the terrorism that's holding everyone hostage in this thing where we're investing and pouring all of our money and then making it so expensive unnecessarily. Isn't it?
Can I tell you about a revelation I had? Because it was from acorn squash. I got a revelation because the acorn squash grows now in the coldest of winter nights, where I'm outside and I'm thinking, I'm freezing cold. I can't even take it. This acorn squash is growing, right? So I was of the mindset that I don't really think I like squash or whatever. So I ended up deciding, let me get squash. So I got it right in season because it's in season and it was available. And I'm listening to the news and the craze going on about the flu. And, that's part of my thing where I'm like, I'm not really so worried. But then when I tasted this acorn squash that was so utterly amazing that even my child was like, gobbling it down and fulfilling, I thought, man, if this thing grows in the harshest of winters, it's experiencing amazing nutrients in the ground because it's time to grow. It's getting the same sunlight as I'm getting, right? And now I'm eating it. I'm taking it in. So I'm getting this amazing seasonal energy. I don't have to worry about the flu. Like, why am I worrying about that?
And, especially because if you're combining it with, animals healthier than you are. Like, I'm saying things like put some ground beef or some kind of sausage.
I had some pastured pork in the middle of that.
Yeah, like if you put something on there, some healthy, clean fat on there, then, your body can absorb those vitamins and nutrition. But eating seasonally is the same as, like respecting this circadian rhythm, this balance. Otherwise, people are villainizing. Did you know that they're villainizing these different vegetables at different times of the year, saying they're too high in starch and too high in sugar and too high in blah, 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 and whatever. And I'm just thinking, like, we don't need one more reason to villainize a vegetable. And if it's in season, it is your medicine.
Right.
And how can you talk about with us, how this pertains to the soil? I'm saying the same thing for our animals. You're saying that plant is fighting for its life. And so are our animals, right? Uncle Mark, you got those chickens like somewhere in some, I don't know, heated home, or are they outside fighting the elements, or what's going on?
No, we had them when they're little baby chicks. We had some this winter. We don't really like to do that in a heated greenhouse, but usually chicken is seasonal too. and usually your season will run from March through November. Basically we try to not to raise them during the winter time. Now the laying hens, of course, they quit laying and they just hunker down, if you will. And some people, I know some people that put lights in the hen, with their layers, the artificial light, and they'll continue to lay in greater quantities. But my nephew Hayes and my sister are against that. I don't know whether I'm for or against it. I think it's probably good to let them rest. And and I don't mean keep them in there. I mean, some people lengthen the daylight hours, to so that they'll continue to lay. I know that our egg production went way down this winter, particularly when it got really cold. So I think it is seasonal. I think it's probably the best thing to do is just to let them rest, you know,
But
because they are working pretty hard.
just because it's seasonal does not mean that we're absent of all that food, correct?
Right.
No, no, no. They're regenerating too. You know, they're getting ready, and then as soon as the daylight hours get longer and it warms up a little bit, they start laying like crazy again.
Yeah.
But that just
So
requires some planning, right? Like that's what I'm always telling everyone. Just like we got the freezers full of certain meats because chicken is out of season, but we have chicken for the people who planned to have
Right.
the chicken, you know?
Yeah, you have to plan ahead for it. Yeah.
And the same with the eggs, because our eggs off the farm are good up to a year if you refrigerate them properly. And, you know,
Well, that's right, but that's a lot of. I mean, I know I've sold you know, eggs to people, and I tell them, you know, you leave them on. I'll leave mine on the counter I've left them on there for a couple of months.
mhm,
Never been refrigerated,
right.
and they're perfect. So, you know, you can eggs don't go bad that fast unless they've had that outer membrane stripped off, and that's what happens when they chlorinate them. You know,
Right.
and
I mean,
so
they're
they
disinfecting and like killing. Basically, they're making everything as enzymatically and bacterially dead as possible, right? So,
right, because you know, if we were doing, you know, hundreds and hundreds or thousands of dozens of eggs every week, we'd have to do the same thing.
yeah.
You know, there's no way you could keep them, and that's why, you know, they don't do it because it's not. There'd be no way to do it.
And that's required only by the centralized organization. So if you're, you know, supplying a centralized corporation, then you have to meet these standards, which is better. That's the reason why it's better to have a relationship with a human being, right? And not a
You
corporation.
you get a real egg, yeah. One that
Right.
hasn't been, yeah, one that hasn't been chlorinated and, you know, beat around, and you know, it's just a much more. It's just much better to do it that way. But a lot of people, you know, it's a matter of convenience. That's what I find.
That's
What do
my
you
word.
People get used to going to a grocery store, you know, and they, you know, I had a friend that visited me, and even I'm out here on the farm, and she, you know, she'd go out there and find stuff out there that I didn't even know about, you know, bring it in and cook it up, you know, and I mean, so it's just what you're used to. People get used to going to a grocery store instead of going to a farm. But I mean, to me, it makes sense. You have to know where your food's come. To me, it's a matter of knowing where your food comes from.
Right.
If I go into a grocery store, I don't know where it came from.
Well, this is the moment where we're promoting collaboration. You know, this is where relationships are so important. And, you know, I had someone who came to pick their food up this week and they were just chatting away, you know, and they said, oh, you know, I'm sorry. Now I'm just socializing. And I said, well, why are you apologizing? I mean, this is our social hour, you know, and what's wrong with that? And why isn't it okay for us to live within the community and enjoy our visits with each other while we get our medicine? You know, you can't get that in a grocery store
No.
or a centralized.
And I think it's
corporation.
important for people to realize we call our farmer Uncle Mark. We call our farmer Uncle Mark for a reason.
Yeah.
We
Right.
know him. We know him well. And, you know, it started, I want people to understand it. It wasn't all the time. It starts as any relationship. You have to go to them and you have to ask them questions. You have to get to know them. You have to, you know, understand who they are, how they do things, as well as them with us.
Right.
Who are they feeding? Who are they bringing food to and nourishment to? And in that vein, Uncle Mark, I would love to know, in your opinion, as a regenerative farmer, what questions, if I came to you for the first time, would you be looking for me to ask?
Well, I think that where I'd start is to make sure that everything that we fed the animals was non-GMO. And I think And I wouldn't say is it organic or not organic, because that can get confusing. I would say, is the feed non-GMO, and do you use soy? Because I think soy is a really, really bad thing, even though you can use organic soy, but there's a lot of other reasons why soy is bad besides that. It's
I know we could do a whole show on soy, right?
do a whole show on soy. So so those are the and would be the main thing, and that their farm and whatever produce, if you're buying produce, is it chemical free, without any chemicals? You don't use chemicals or commercial fertilizers or herbicides. That's a good place to start. Now, the only difference, and if they incorporate animals in their crop rotations,
right?
And those are the main things. And then, and of course, what everybody wants and what I like and what we like out here is the more educated the consumer, the more we like it, because that means the less talking we have to do, and we can, we don't have to explain exactly what it is we're doing, because people know what we're doing.
Well,
so I think an educated consumer is your best customer.
Yeah, you shouldn't have to feel like you're defending yourself all the time, right?
No, I don't mind answering the questions. I mean, I had a lady, asked me about, she wanted to see the feed tag. I didn't mind showing it to her. Right. She asked a lot of, I don't mind answering the questions, because once the consumer is educated, then, you don't have to do, then you can do what you need to do, and you don't have to worry about explaining yourself about everything you do. You do have to, people have to understand why, and I've had people ask me, why is the chicken cost so much, quote unquote. I don't happen to think it does if you know how to use a chicken. But anyway, some people do think, and I say, well, this is why these chickens are, this is why it costs more than a factory chicken. I don't mind answering the question.
Right. Well, and then you establish feed integrity. And the other part of the relationship, I think that's cool, is, we don't always all have to get along and like each other, but we all need each other. And it promotes, some grace, and it promotes pliability, and it promotes things in the community. I feel like that society is really kind of lost. There isn't any understanding anymore, because everybody expects that Harris Teeter or whatever, some centralized food distribution place is like a corporation is just going to make it better, because they're just always trying to sell you something you don't even really need. And when you become educated and gain this independence for self-regulating food, then you find that you don't actually need a lot of things. And we're not what is it I'm trying to say? Like, we're not trying to sell anybody anything. We're selling the education. How's that?
Right.
We're trying to sell the independence.
Well,
we're trying to sell the information.
I've done a lot more lucrative things in my career, I can tell you that, than what I'm doing now.
Right.
But for me, it's like, I'm old enough, I've looked around and I see all these people get sick and all, and I'm almost 67 years old, and I don't take any prescription drugs, nothing. And I don't know the last time I've even been to a doctor. And I don't know, most of the people I know in their 40s are on 3 or 4 different prescription drugs. They feel terrible all the time, and kids are sick all the time. And, and so for me, it's like, you can either spend your money on the food, or you can and be happy, or spend your money on the pharmaceuticals and be miserable.
Yeah.
And who wants to be around miserable people? And most of our customers are happy people.
They are very happy
because they feel good, and they're chipper. Even my friend I was telling you about in the other episode, you know, I've known him for 15 years, and I mean, he would be so grumpy sometimes I wouldn't even want to go see him, you know. But he's a real
Yeah.
pleasure to be around now.
So
So most
you've
people there-
seen firsthand how the food on your farm makes a difference in people's energy level, in
Yeah.
people's mental state, in their stress levels, in their
Mental-
emotional levels.
Exactly. Even for myself, but you know, I feel better. And the more I get into it, and I mean, I'm like everybody else, you know, we're all learning, you know, and I certainly don't know everything there is to know about it, but I do know the deeper I delve into it and the more I get into it and the more I adhere to, you know, certain protocols, the better I feel.
And
Your body tells you, you know, I don't have to have some doctor to tell me how I feel.
Right.
Already know
I
how
don't think
feel.
anybody knows that they're supposed to know how they feel and be comfortable with it. And I think it's because of the fear, like the terrorism of, you know, you go to see the doctor one day and next day you find out you have cancer or whatever. And
Well,
so,
I liked what you said in one episode of yours I listened to, and you said that you just and Valerie said, I think she just she was going to act as if she had cancer, already had it. You know what? That's interesting because I've done that myself, and even my sister has told me. You know, she said I just feel as if I'm all right. I'm going to eat just like I have cancer. So
but why do we have to do that, right? Like, that's so crazy. Like, I think it's so crazy right now. I had, you know, I've had people in my family also say to me, you know, like, why am I being so difficult when I'm making this choice and not just, you know, allowing commodity food-like substances or chemistry projects? They get offended that I say that it's a chemistry project or it is commodity crap or whatever, you know, and that I have like this elitist standard but you know, if I was to say to them I have cancer and because I have cancer I just received this diagnosis, first they're going to pray for me, then they're going to, you know, they'll be ready to do everything for me, then, you know, then they'll be like, oh my God, and you know, whatever, going crazy, and then it'll be okay. But what if I just don't want to have cancer? I mean, they can't believe that this is a preventative measure. They can't believe that if you don't put chemicals in your body that would prevent this horrible diagnosis from happening. And I find it laughable. So then I'm like, what do I do? I mean, I've actually had this conversation with my husband before. I'm like, do we just want to tell everybody that this is what's happening with me so that the family will stop acting crazy and we can just eat properly? Like, I don't really know. Is that what has to happen? You know, and which is really funny because we've already, I mean, it's not the funny part. This is not the funny part. But we've already had a child that battled cancer. We lost to cancer. I mean, she's dead. And she taught us something. And when I bring that up, then no one has nothing to say. But, you know,
well, because they're very uncomfortable, they don't know what to say. But I can tell you this now, for sure, all this autism and all this stuff that's going on, it didn't exist 50 years ago. And I can tell you, I have quite a bit of experience in the food industry, and not just in the production side of it, but in the processing side of it. And these people don't care about your health. And if you want the government to be the guardian of your food supply, I'm sorry, you're in for a rude awakening because none of them care. As a matter of fact, the entire agribusiness and pharmaceutical business is not built on health; it's built on sickness.
That's right.
And if you eat properly and take care of your, you know, watch what you eat. I mean, it's hard even to do that now. It's getting hard. I mean, where do you get? That's why this food movement is so important because if you do that properly, then you don't need to worry about, you know, a hospital unless you have a car wreck or something.
Right. Yeah. So we're not anti-medical realm because obviously you need them if you literally have a car accident, or like my son, he, was playing soccer on concrete and broke his wrist. So he was going to need to go, to the emergency room, which we took him. But, all this thing that everyone has made it so common, from allergies and skin irritations to, everyone acts like it's fine. It's not a big deal. I was listening to a young lady share her experience as a, with a reaction that she had actually to a vaccination. And she was saying that, she was fine when she, had like minor rashes and that those kind of things didn't bother her, or when she had her migraines, which she thought were normal. I don't remember having a headache. That's not normal. I mean, this is a young lady who's like, said that she was having migraines when she was 11 and 12
Yeah.
and 13. And these things are not normal, folks. I mean, if you believe that your child is supposed to ever suffer a migraine, like, the fact that you're not having a red flag about that right now is, when people tell me that they're totally fine and they don't have any health issues and their kids are perfectly healthy, and these are the same people who don't want their kids to go somewhere if someone else had a fever, because they're afraid their kid's going to now be the next person to get a fever. Guess what? Your kid ain't going to get a fever just because somebody else had a fever. If their immune system is strong,
Right.
If their body is self-regulating, then that it's almost impossible that that's going to happen.
Yeah. That's why it's so important for us to realize, that we are actually the ones in power, but we're quiet and we're sleeping, but we need to wake up. We're having this discussion so everybody wakes up, because we really only need the doctor for the instances Neethi was talking about.
Emergent.
But right now, presently, we need it because people are dependent and they don't realize that they can actually change their fate and not be kept alive by pharmaceuticals. But right now, people really need pharmaceuticals because they're not taking ownership of their health.
They think they need it.
Absolutely. They think they need pharmaceuticals because they are. And so pharmaceutical companies are responding to you.
Because they don't know anything else. So you know what?
That's their business. That's their business. So.
But on that point, I had someone who said to me, I have to cut my gallbladder out because she didn't know what else to do. Until we said to her, that's what this show is for. This show is to give you the hope that just like we don't know, so many people don't know what to do without the pharmaceuticals. We're telling you, I mean, this is the moment, Uncle Mark, right? Like where I want you to help us explain to everybody. This is one reason I was so excited about having you on the show, is that you can help us explain to people that re-inoculating and restoring the soil health is the same as us being able to restore our gut health and our immune health. And
you can't do that artificially.
Right.
You can't. And the thing is, I've even learned this myself, researching this about this gut bacteria, that's why, I knew it worked, but I didn't know exactly why. But, when you eat living food and it's in a gut with living bacteria, that synergy is what creates the nourishment of that food. And when you're starving yourself, you're susceptible to all kinds of diseases. The disease may just be a manifestation of your nutritional deficiency.
Exactly.
That's like that healthy plants. Bugs don't like to eat healthy plants. Healthy plants can stand more cold weather. They're more resilient. It's the same with people.
And animals, the livestock, right?
Livestock, it's all the same. So if you're eating dead food, putting it in a dead gut, what do you think is going to happen?
Or a sick animal. Can you talk about that?
A sick ant, same thing.
Right. The animals that are in the store right now are in kidney and liver
failure. You're eating everything
failure.
that animal's had, and you don't want to know everything that animal's had. All kinds of antibiotics and all kinds of. Even in the processing, what they do, how they get processed. It's just and you're eating. So that's why the more I learn about it, I guess you can call it even turning into a fanatic. But I mean, I'm really kind of, I get real picky about what I'll eat and where I'll eat. You know, that's just the way it is. And because it seems like, I think you can tell when you're having progress because you start feeling good. And if you go off the wagon, so to speak, fall off the wagon, you can tell immediately. I can.
Yeah.
You know, I'm like, boy, something's not right here.
Yeah, you could be working so hard to, regenerate your gut and have healthy gut, and then eat some piece of meat that they, put antibiotics on and
then you
and
destroy
then you
it.
kill your gut.
Exactly.
Or eat a plant that way, because you know what? Everybody acts like the plants aren't billing us. Well, guess what? I mean, I remember one time we were on a trip and my daughter ate an apple that someone gave her because it was an apple, and she ate it, and she actually had to run to the bathroom. She vomited the apple.
Wow.
And before that, she was fine. And so it isn't just about these animals. I don't know. Can you help us elaborate on, the other thing we were talking, we started this whole conversation, Uncle Mark, about the browning of the earth. And, I'd like to.
Here, let me say that about that.
Yeah.
Here's what the earth, the soil in the earth is like your bank account. You had $1 million in your bank account, you retired, and you kept drawing it out, drawing it out, and drawing it out, and now you're broke.
It's not green anymore.
It's not green anymore. It's brown. There's no more reserves left. There's nothing left. And that's the way the soil is there's nothing left in it. So to regreen it, you have to have animals. There is no other way to do it.
Can you say that again?
To regreen the depletion that we've suffered in the soil, you have to have animals.
Why?
Because it's the task. I mean, I can regreen my backyard, but the task would be so overwhelming. There'd be nowhere to haul anything in to do the job. The animals they're there for a reason. You have to have it. The animals do it. It's just too big a job.
It's in their nature to do it. That's what
It's
people don't
That's
understand. We're, as usual, interfering with nature. And when we interfere with nature, it causes the problems with the soil.
It's not always convenient, though, for us, like to let the animals be walking around. And
Well, 150 years ago, out on the Great Plains, there were millions of buffalo. Okay, they killed the buffalo off, and it was the richest soil in the United States. It's the corn belt, the wheat. I mean, it was so rich.
Right.
And now, the soil is dying. It's just like anything else. They had a huge bank account, and over the last 150 years, it's depleted now.
Well, they created the Dust Bowl, remember?
Created
and then
they
tried to remediate that. Where are we at with that?
And what they did is they slowed it down. But they can't do it without animals. It cannot be done without animals.
And
I didn't always believe that, but once it's been depleted, like the soil on this farm out here, it was a tobacco farm, and it was just dead. It would hardly grow weeds. And after we first started with the chickens, in one season you could say, you could see exactly where the chickens were. Everything was green. The weeds where the chickens were 3 times taller than the weeds where there weren't any chickens.
Say it again. Say that part again.
The weeds were 3 times taller after one season where there were chickens than the parts of the farm where there were no chickens.
And you did an experiment with supplementing 100 different things, remember? And when you guys were doing that, then talk about the times when you were amending it versus finally putting the birds on it. Because how many years was Hayes trying to remediate that soil?
Well, it's just faster with the birds because everything you have to haul it in.
Right. Please elaborate for people. Like get into the nitty gritty.
Right, I'm going to elaborate.
Yeah.
That's when you have to be a biologist. And that's when you have to be a chemist.
Right.
Because you have to know exactly how much of what to add, how to add it, and what ratio it should be added. Okay. If the chicken's out there digging around and pooping everywhere, you don't have to think about anything because he's putting it there.
And what was the quality of the produce that you guys produced after putting the birds on the land versus not?
Well, I think it's better for a number of reasons because, well, it takes a little time to get there, but it's better for a number of reasons because, first of all, it helps in weed control because these birds are eating the weed seed. And you don't ever strip your soil. You're always growing. I used to wonder why I watch hays let the weeds get real tall out here. But see, that's all adding organic material back into the soil. Well, we never could grow weeds out here before, believe it or not. Can you believe that? Somebody who couldn't even grow weeds?
Yeah, no, it's true.
Because there was nothing in the soil was completely dead.
Right.
And now you come out here and we can grow weeds 6-8 feet tall.
You couldn't even hold water though, right? Because if you can't grow weeds, you can't hold water.
Yeah. So all that, it makes it so much easier. Then you grow the weeds and then you incorporate that all into the soil. The chickens are out there doing the work for you. Mother Nature is a much better chemist than we ever will be.
Collaboration. You had to collaborate with these other living creatures and work synergistically. And this is the moment that people are just not.
I would never dream of. I would never want to do vegetables without animals because, first of all, it would be too expensive to do a good job. I don't think it would be economic.
And how long would that even last? That's what I keep telling everybody.
Well, it would last as long as you could afford to buy and stuff, and there was some place to mine it from some other.
So you're browning somewhere to green the other somewhere.
Yeah. So greening the browning of the earth, I understand completely. What it is it's through commercial agriculture. They have depleted all the reserves out of the soil. There's nothing left in it. The only way to do it in mass is to put animals back on. That's the only way.
And what I would like people to understand, Uncle Mark, is when we say browning of the earth, that's kind of a high level analogy in order to kind of incorporate what we as humans have to do in order to have a earth that will sustain us. Right. We have to make sure not only earth that could sustain us, but then go down to our local level through you that we can have a farm and a farmer that also is green and has nutrients.
And we need millions of farmers doing this.
Yes.
And you see, the thing is that people say, well, there's plenty of food in the grocery store. There's a lot of food. We're not going to have a collapse in agriculture. We are having it. We are in it.
Right.
Right.
It's happening, which is the reason why they've created this vegan movement, which I don't know how many people are paying attention to this or not. But what's happening is that the people in charge are trying to get everyone accustomed to eating a bunch of supplements. Because if you like Google how to be a vegan,
if you connect the dots,
right?
All of a sudden,
if you Google how to be a vegan, you have to have your suitcase of supplements along with the few vegetables or whatever they're having. Which is most vegans I've ever met aren't even eating vegetables really. But
no, well, I tell my vegan acquaintances, that if you want to be a vegan, fine, but you can't be a vegan without animals. Somebody's got to raise the animals,
right?
Because you're not going to be able to have, there is no way you can do this without animals.
You can't have seeds without the animals. Can you please talk about that?
You can't rehabilitate the soil without animals, because how do you think it got to be soil in the first place? What do you
Right.
think all those millions of buffalo were doing on the Great Plains?
Right.
So what the animals help do is till the land, if you will.
They
No, they
tilled
were-
the
they were
land. They
putting the organic
fertilized the
matter.
land. They put all this organic matter in the land. You know, it was
It's
all
not just them moving the soil.
Yeah.
If they don't just,
and it was so
they're
rich. And they did
nourishing it.
such over millions of years.
Right.
Think about that. Millions of years it took to do that. It
And-
only took man 150 years to ruin.
well, they stopped. They, you know, what we were talking about originally was the lions and the tigers that nobody's thinking about. So,
And-
like, if you take the prey predator, you know, portion, like that aspect out of the planet, you know, which is really convenient for all of us because now it's a safer place for everybody to be. But the moment that you do that, you stop the movement of the creatures on the planet, right? And then, you know, it's not just that they're moving on it. It is, and it was miles long and miles deep. We don't even know how
Well,
many.
So isn't that part of the argument as well? Is we don't
Oh.
have enough land that farmers can be on
Oh,
in order to feed the amount of people that
Oh,
we
please
need
tell
to
us.
feed.
Uncle
It's-
Mark,
That's
tell
baloney.
tell
What is your
tell us
opinion
that.
of
Yes,
that as
tell
a
us about
farmer?
that.
That's baloney.
We're back on
You-
the baloney.
Yeah, that's baloney. Here's the difference. During the Depression, back in the 30s, I think it was like 10% of the population of the United States lived in the cities and 90% lived in rural areas. Okay? And about 70% of the people in this country, and a lot of people don't even realize this, like 70% of the population in one way or another depended on agriculture as a living. 100 years ago, it was 90%. So now, how many people do you know make a living in agriculture or agriculture-related industry? Probably,
None.
you see.
They,
So
you
what
know,
needs
they,
to happen is we don't need, they're talking about all our jobs are being sent overseas. All that needs to happen is we need to say, hey, let's go back the way it was. Let's turn it around where 90% of the people are involved in agriculture. That's all it takes.
Well,
well,
what about the land, Uncle Mark? Do we
the land problem, just talk about that. She's saying we already know, okay, in regenerative agriculture, we already know that the amount of land that you actually require to grow food is not very much. Can you please talk about that?
Well, yeah, because it's going to be much more productive. Look, it's much more productive. You use a lot higher percentage of the crop. For example, in commercially grown tomatoes in Florida, we threw away probably 75% of what we grew. We didn't even pick it. Stayed out in the field because it wasn't big enough, wasn't perfect enough to pick it. So we threw it away. Most of the fresh fruit and vegetables, they get thrown away.
And the animals, let's not forget that they'll put 40,000 birds in a house and 20,000 of them will be dead. And they can afford to lose that much life to produce it.
If you spread it out, if you had for sure. I mean, it's the farmland. You know, when they first, as the soil depleted, and they first started using artificial fertilizers or mine fertilizer materials, the production went way up because it was already on the way down, and it went way up, it plateaued, and now it's collapsing. All you got to do for people that want to be, environmentalists is Google up Polk County, Florida, Phosphate Industry. That's where I'm from, Polk County, Florida. And it looks like a moonscape with these giant cranes digging phosphate to make fertilizer out of it. And if you think that's sustainable, I mean, it looks like it looks like an absolute moonscape, and right in the center of Florida, where all these phosphate deposits are. So the world is running out of phosphate. So what are they going to do? What's going to happen when you run out of artificial fertilizer to fertilize these crops with?
And we've already proven you don't need it. I mean, that's the other part
You
of it.
don't need it.
You know, it's already been proven that you don't need it because you can have everything self-regulating. But, you know, you were talking about how many farmers there are. What about in India? Like, you know, Indians try to do everything better than the West, but they want to be like the West and they follow the West, right? So Monsanto went there and they tried to genetically modify all the cotton over there. And the moment that they started putting anyone in debt over there versus, you know, like they have all these farmers, I call it modern day slavery, the way they have them all indebted over here. You know, over there.
Same here too.
Yeah, over there, though, Indians aren't going to let themselves be put in debt. So what did they do? They committed suicide. The moment that they realized that they're not going to be able to get their way out of this, instead of going through years and years of trying to figure debt out, then every 10 seconds there was an Indian committing suicide. An Indian cotton farmer was committing suicide. It was all in the news. And if you go there today, the desertification over there is so dramatic. It's so traumatic that it has literally created a sand drift going into China with so much pollution. They're calling it pollution when it's desertification. It's the desert moving in, okay? And it's so bad that in China, they're buying oxygen tanks the way that we buy bottled water, you know, because they literally can't breathe. I mean, everyone saw that they were over there wearing the masks and everybody thought it had something to do with the, you know, flu or whatever. But also they need those masks because they can't breathe because of the desertification, the desert moving in on them. And it's that bad even in New Delhi. It's that bad in a lot of places in India where, you know, I mean, we were there and 2 years ago, we came home and my children said, I can't wait to go home so I can breathe. You know, that they could not wait to come home so they could breathe because the state of affairs was so bad. Well, and when I went there 25 years ago, that was not the case. But that's how hard and I mean, if you want to see proof, then go somewhere like that and see, you know, what's happened already over there. The desertification is happening there at a much greater pace than it is here.
I think in seeing that brings a lot of fear to people, and they fear that that's going to happen here as well.
It is happening,
and that makes them want the GMOs. That makes them want the science experiment because they do not believe nature can sustain itself because it hasn't in other parts of the world.
No, it was in other parts of the world until Monsanto got there. Let's be really clear about it. It was sustaining it just fine. The moment Monsanto got there with the GM seed is the moment that those people quit farming and they committed suicide. And before that, that was not happening. It was not happening. It was not happening. It only was happening after.
There's a reform banker that used to work for Goldman Sachs. Her name is Nomi Prinz, and she wrote a book called Disaster Capitalism. And that's what that is. What you're seeing is disaster capitalism. Mm-hmm. So instead of people being scared, what they ought to do is get involved, because I'll make a prediction here. Is that the one of the most biggest opportunities, entrepreneurial opportunities in the world right now is farming. And farm related stuff, like the things you're doing that are all farm related, education, those are going to be the big opportunities because people have to eat. And they can only practice this disaster capitalism for so long. Mm-hmm. And you know, you're going to start having famines. Right. And you know, and I know people can't believe that because every time they go in a grocery store, the shelves are full. But you know what, the supply line in the grocery store, you're 3 days from there being nothing.
Well, I mean, I don't know, Uncle Mark. They're putting food-like substances in there. You know, my chemistry lab can make that food in a minute.
Well, that's what it is.
If their shelves are full, it's full. Their shelves are full of chemistry projects.
Well, that's why they're doing this artificial meat.
Right.
They're not look.
It's on the market, people. They don't have to they're not even labeling it.
The psychopaths that run this world, they know they know what I'm telling them. They
Right.
know this.
The people
It's
in
not
charge.
like a
But
big secret.
I don't think it is a secret to people. What I think is happening is they tell us, but they tell us it's for our benefit. They tell us
They tell you
we're
that
enhancing
they're
the
doing it
food
to
for our
feed the
benefit.
world, and they know it's not the best thing for you, but they're doing it to feed the world
Yes.
because it's the only way.
Yes. And what we're
And
trying to
we've
do,
got Pfizer over here that's going to ease your pain once we make you sick with the
Yes.
food you eat.
Right.
Yeah.
but
And
we're
all that
trying.
together is about a $500 billion business.
Is that all? I
It's-
think it must be much more. I mean,
well, just in the United States,
Right.
way more than that.
exactly.
So it's what people refuse to accept. And then, I know sometimes my sister thinks I'm too extreme, but the truth is this: they know what they're doing.
Social engineering.
People need to wake up. They need to wake up and they need to get involved. They don't have to become a farmer, but they can. There's all kinds of opportunities out there for this and the farm-related activities that people can become involved in, because take a negative and turn it into a positive.
Yes.
Well, I mean, all the farmers need infrastructure. I mean, everybody needs infrastructure. There are plenty of jobs for people to do. I mean, and actually, if we were to actually, turn the infrastructure around and try to do something a lot more regenerative, I mean, why can't we try to go to solar power? I mean, what is going on right now with the drilling of the coast? I mean, I don't even want to get into all these political discussions.
No,
but we don't need that for energy power. We can.
No, you don't need that.
For energy power, we can have solar.
The biggest thing that can make a difference is people can refuse to to participate in eating garbage food.
Right.
And the only reason you've got an organic food industry now is because a bunch of hippies 20 years ago or 30 years ago started growing this stuff out, and that's how that happened.
Right.
And once enough people, the consumer demands it, you will get it.
Yeah.
Well,
it really
I want
starts
the
with us.
I think that
People don't even realize the power they have. Like I was saying before, it's us. So
But
we need to.
I was just going to say that based on what I was saying about the drilling of the coast and everything, that petrochemical piece of it is not just with cars. Uncle Mark, talk about the petrochemicals that are going into the soil.
Most of the
Most
oil,
of it is
petrochemical goes into agricultural fertilizers, chemicals, pharmaceuticals.
It's going into the petrochemical fertilizers and into the petrochemical food colorings and all the food production more than your car. So it's not just about trying to drive less. These are the shiny bright lights. The distractions are, don't.
Well, and people look, that's exactly what they do. They say, "Oh, what can I do?" Well, what you can do is just what you guys are doing.
Get out of the grocery store,
and you can get healthy while you do it.
Right. So we're about to get up.
And people will know. People will say, "Well, why do you look so good? Or why do you feel so good? Or why aren't you on this medication or that medication?"
Yes, sir.
And they're going to want, that's my friend. I stayed after him. And I mean, I told him up front, I said, "Well, you're getting ready to retire now." I said, "It's too bad. You're going to retire, get down there and be dead in 2 years."
All that retirement got saved
all
up.
All that stuff you worried about all these years is going to be all for nothing. And, there's no better thing to have, and you guys know this, there's no better thing to have than your health.
Right.
If you don't have it, what do you got?
So, Uncle Mark, what is 3 generations? What is that? How long does it take for a farmer to go from one way of farming to regenerative? What is 3 generations of?
Well, I don't think it takes 3. You can start now, and I think you can do it in a generation. It won't.
Now we're talking about the 3 generations of the livestock. We were saying that you see improvement in the epigenetics of a creature
Oh, yeah,
after
yeah,
the
yeah.
third generation. So
Yeah.
you're talking about, right? Like
Yeah.
for human beings,
The
like,
life cycle. Yeah.
right.
Yeah. We're already seeing it out here. This farm is like, it's amazing
Wow.
about what's happened just in the years that we've been out here doing this.
How long
And
has it been?
it's been about 7 years, and it's every year it gets better and it's better and better. And,
How did it accelerate faster after you put the birds down on the ground than versus before?
well, the birds make everything twice as fast because see or more than that. I don't even know how you can make a comparison because the birds grow the weeds. There were fields out there that like I said, the weeds wouldn't even grow.
So you had a dead farmland while y'all tried to create the living soils without the animals for how many years before you put the animals down?
Well, we always had animals out here from the beginning, but we didn't have them. We were learning too. We had them,
Right.
Joel Salatin style, but now we let them kind of free roam, and so we learned and we have more birds. In the first place, when you first start in this, you say, well, okay, I need all these birds, but what am I going to do with all the birds? We didn't know what to do with all the birds.
Wow.
So, it kind of builds up, people, you have to, you raise the birds, you sell the birds, you get more birds, bigger birds, and then it just adds up and it kind of goes parabolic, then it goes a lot faster.
Well, I think what we've learned
So-
today is that everybody, we're getting on the hour here, Uncle Mark, so we're going to wrap it up, okay? But I
Okay.
think that one of the big lessons from this second episode is that there's hope, and we already know it, and we can already do it. And, the solution is to create relationships with regenerative farmers and take action by changing your lifestyle so that you are getting out of the grocery store, because these centralized industries are supporting, the incorrect energy, force, which
Quit
is the petrol.
supporting. Yeah.
Yeah, and so people will argue you should eat more meat, eat more vegetables, don't eat this. We don't care about that. We only care.
Quit supporting the people that are killing us.
That's right.
We're
That's
supporting
right.
the people who are ripping us off. Quit doing it.
And support diversification, because sure, if you want to just mostly eat vegetables versus the other people that want to have meat, we don't care. That isn't the point.
No.
And actually, there's always going to be more meat eaters. That's just the way it is, and that's how it is
Well,
even
some
right
people
now.
even bodies require more. I mean,
Right.
you can even take some test. I think Mercola talks about that. That determines whether you need more meat than other people.
Right.
Everybody's different. People are different. Each animal's different. Everything's different, but they all work in harmony.
That's right. We need the synergistic energy.
And I mean, that's what gets me stoked. I know that I see it, and I've seen enough out here. It's almost like a miracle.
It is a miracle. It is a miracle.
I've heard Valerie's story. It's like a miracle.
Right.
And I've seen with for myself and my friends, I think, God, and so and you do want to shake people and tell them to wake up, and they think it's hopeless. It's not hope.
That's right. Well, thank you for helping to support the hope and doing all the hard work that you do and helping to nourish our community, because we really love
Thank you for
that.
all the work you do. We appreciate your hard work too.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll have you back on real
and
soon.
all your support.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Hey,
Thank
folks,
you,
tune
Uncle
in
Mark.
next week and see what we're going to be talking about then. Hey friends, we hope that this production has served you in some way today. If you would like to hear more shows like this, please help us grow our army of Minas by visiting our website and making a donation today. We are a 501c3 nonprofit corporation. And, I ask that you please like and share this video, follow us on Facebook, become involved with us on Instagram and Twitter, And all of our links can be found in the show notes. Thank you.
You are tuned to the Nissan Communications Network. If you tuned in too late, you can always watch each program in its entirety or download an MP3 audio file of it in the archives section at nissancommunications.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Twitter, and like us on Facebook. Sponsored by Telestream's Wirecast software, StreamingGear.com, Carolina Apparel, and DeltaForce.net.